Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Cara Silletto. Workforce thought leader Cara Silletto is a highly sought after keynote speaker and works with organizations to reduce unnecessary employee turnover by bridging generational gaps and making leaders more effective in their roles. Workforce magazine named Cara a game changer, and Recruiter.com named her in their top 10 company culture experts to watch. Cara is also the author of the book Staying Power: Why Your Employees Leave and How to Keep Them Longer. With that, I will turn the presentation over to you, Cara.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So today we're going to focus on the attraction and recruiting side of things. As Maggie mentioned, this is part of our Magnet series, which is really about becoming a magnet employer, an employer who can get and keep the talent that we need to be successful, to be profitable, to be productive. And so the last webinar was about management effectiveness. You can get that recording if you missed it. Today we'll talk about the A, of course. And then next week we're talking about guidance upon entry, which is the onboarding segment of our strategies. Then we'll talk about new staffing models, empowering retention champions, and building trust through transparency. So I hope you're able to join us for this whole series of short webinars that will help you today and down the road as you continue to work to become that magnet employer to attract and keep talent. So let's talk for a moment about the market. Now, of course, the market shifts. And just like the real estate market, when sometimes we're in a buyer's market, sometimes we're in a seller's market, that is going to shift based on things like supply and demand. So of course we're seeing a shift now, and we're going to continue to every several years. We will see things kind of ebb and flow back and forth in the workforce market. Whenever we are in an employer's market, that's typically a time when we are either in a recession or it's really tough to find jobs, when there's higher unemployment, for example. In those times, it's easy to get and keep people, and that is more of an employer's market. But sometimes we are in an employee's market as well when everybody's hiring. The interesting thing about being in or near a recession is that that happens to certain industries. So what we have seen happen is that we've seen certain industries struggle to hold jobs and to be able to keep their people because of whatever is happening to their industry at that moment. But then other industries or professions in that same moment might be hiring like crazy. So I've seen times when maybe food service or retail are not hiring folks or even letting folks go, and yet our healthcare clients at that same moment are hiring hundreds and thousands of people for food service jobs and to work within the healthcare sector. So just keep that in mind, that when we think about attracting and recruiting folks, we need to think about our competition. We need to think about what industries are booming at that moment. Where could maybe we poach people from? Where are some areas that are not doing as well as we are, that we could help serve those communities and provide jobs? But also, who might we be losing jobs to? Why do people leave our company, and what industries are they going to, or professions are they transitioning to? Keep your eye on the market at all times and think about who your real competition is and what's going on. Are you in your industry currently in a employee's market, or are you in an employer's market? And that, again, is going to shift over time. It's not going to stay the same. So let me give you a healthcare example here. A lot of my clients happen to be healthcare or senior care type of organizations. And this applies to everyone, though. If you think about serving this population, you think about the market itself, the customers that we serve. You think about, we have to stay on top of what are their needs, what are their expectations as a customer, how are they going to choose us as their provider, how are they going to choose our goods and services that we make. We are always looking at our customers, aren't we? We do the market research. We spend time and money on that, and we will watch for the trends. We will adjust based on the customer's needs and wants and demands. But let me ask you this. How much has your organization evolved for your internal customers? Because our staff, no matter whether you're in healthcare, you're in manufacturing, construction, agriculture, education, whatever area you are in, we have to think of our current staff and the candidates and applicants that we want to attract. We have to think of them as customers. We have to evolve with their changing needs. We have to stay on top of the market and what do they want? What do they need? What are they demanding? So many managers and leaders that I talk to, they still are operating the same way they did 10 or 20 years ago. They're still managing people the same way. They're still recruiting people the same way. They're still touting the competitive benefits on their job descriptions, which is so generic and doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. And so they are still putting out there the job descriptions and the old way of trying to recruit people and to look attractive. Where the companies who have evolved and realize that people can work in all different areas. They don't have to come work for my company. They have choices. So those companies who realize that it's more of a marketing game, that they really need to revamp their job descriptions to be about, why would you choose to come work for our organization? What do we have to offer you? Instead of a job description being all about, here's what we're looking for, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, apply if you qualify, you know, that type of thing. It should be more about, here's the type of company that we are. Here's our culture and our approach to leadership and our approach to serving our customers. Is that a place that you would love to come be a part of and that you would like to work in? And then they tout what they offer their staff and very specific benefits, very specific things about their culture and all the professional development or management training that's available, things like that. We have to turn this around and treat those applicants and candidates as the customer today. Okay? So, first things first, as we work on really becoming that employer of choice and an employer that is very magnetic, first thing is you have to know your employer brand. This is not your marketing brand. Your marketing brand is about the goods and services that you offer, the quality that you provide to your customers. The employer brand is, are you a great place to work? Your employer brand is what people say about you on the streets. What do people say out in your community about working for you? If someone mentions applying at your company, do they say, oh man, that's a great place to work. I've heard great things about that. Or do they say, ooh, good luck. Everybody I know that ever worked there was miserable or left quickly or whatever they're saying, okay? We don't want that negative side of the employer brand. You can definitely look online these days and see what your digital employer brand is. You can look at Glassdoor.com, Indeed.com, even Google now. Some groups have reviews on there. So stay on top of that. Make sure that you're checking that at least a few times a year to see what people are saying, and encourage your happy employees to write a review. Just like for my book, I'm constantly saying, hey, if you like the book, please write a review, because that's really important to potential buyers. That same thing is true with potential applicants. And if they Google your company, what are they going to see? And does that make them run, or does that make them apply? You've got to know your employer brand and consistently work with the leadership team to maintain and or improve that employer brand over time. Also, if you read anything about your employer brand online, for example, or you hear things through the grapevine and you think, oh, that's not true, or that's not right, or those types of things. Unfortunately, you can't take those down, but I encourage you to really listen to those pieces of critical advice that have been given. Now, if they're blatantly wrong, if they're just not true, then I understand we need to move on and do other things. But if maybe it is true, maybe they said something about the management there is not great. Well, maybe you need some more management training. Or if they say they don't pay well enough, have you done an effective compensation analysis in the last 18 months? to look at what the comp is compared to the other organizations around you. Okay, what I mean is sometimes those complaints, just like when we get it from an external customer of ours, a complaint from an employee can sometimes be a gift in telling us what's really going on. Is it not great management? Was it not great onboarding or training? There's all kinds of things that you could learn from finding out what people are saying about your place of employment. So first things first, know your employer brand. Next, always, always, always be recruiting. Always have your head on a swivel and be watching for talent out there. I have found talent for my team of friends of friends. I have found talent of just going to a networking event, and I totally fell in love with this person, professionally speaking, and said, I want to have that person on my team someday. So I encourage you to have a file, whether it's electronic or a physical folder, where you keep the name and contact information about some of those people. Even if I'm not hiring right now, if I find great people, I want to make sure that when I'm hiring again, those people I can reach out to and specifically ask them to apply. I don't even know yet if they're going to be fully qualified or the best candidate, but I want them in the pool for sure. So keep a list of those folks. Even when you're out eating at a restaurant or you're out somewhere else and someone gives you great customer service, if you would ever need to hire someone like that, get their name and number. And that is a great way to kind of always have a pool of folks that are interested, especially if you're out going to industry events or conferences and things like that. You don't want to be hiring all of a sudden and upset about someone giving you their 2-week notice and then trying to rack your brain, who could I call? Who could I call? Who could fill this job, right? You should have that list right there and just always be recruiting as you're out and about meeting new people. So here are some tips on keeping good candidates. I'll be honest with you guys. I believe that the best recruiting strategy is good retention. So that's why we started this series, and we start all of our strategies with the management effectiveness piece, because we know that managers and supervisors are the most influential people when it comes to staff deciding whether to stay or go. So first, we've got to get management in place. But then when I look at recruiting, I see again and again and again, so many of our clients in healthcare or in other industries, doesn't matter, I see it everywhere. They are letting great candidates slip through their fingers. They have great people who apply, and yet they never get offered the job for several reasons, or they're going off the market before the company can move fast enough. So the next few slides are going to be some tips for keeping the good candidates in your pipeline and having great communication with them so we don't lose them, okay? The first thing is expedite your hiring process. Hiring is happening faster than it has ever happened before. So you cannot let resumes and applications sit on your desk. They cannot sit in your inbox. It cannot sit on your to-do list. Oh, yeah, I'll call her tomorrow or the next day and schedule her interview. Yeah, I'll get to that. I know I need to do that. No, you can't wait, because she will be off the market if you wait a few more days. It's happening so much faster. Smaller businesses can hire within days, and then even larger businesses that used to take months to hire, I see many of them have expedited their process down to weeks to hire, even for very specialized positions and things like that. So if you want to get and keep that talent pool that you're trying to attract in and to get onboarded, you've got to expedite the process. Now, if you happen to be in HR or you are in a position where someone else is the bottleneck, that you're saying, well, yeah, I give all these applications to this manager, but then she just sits on them for days before she calls for interviews or tells me who I can schedule for interviews. You've got to have that conversation with the person that's bottlenecking the process and let them know that every day we delay, we're finding that we're losing good candidates from our applicant pool. So how can I take this off your plate? Can I decide who's going to get interviews and then just schedule those for you if you're too busy? Or can you implement some kind of rule that if I give you an application, you have 1 day or 2 days max to review that and get back to me with a yes or no on interviewing? Whatever that bottleneck is, just make sure that you are trying to find those bottlenecks and blow them up, because we cannot afford for anyone to hold up the process. Also, for those of you who are in workforce spaces and environments where you have to do background checks and drug screening and reference checks and this and this and this, instead of waiting one after another, I realize that businesses don't want to overspend. So I have some clients who will say, well, Cara, I'm not going to pay for a drug screening unless they pass the background check, or vice versa. And so they'll wait for the results of one before they move on to the next test. You will lose candidates if you do that, because they can get jobs faster somewhere else. Keep in mind, the lower the wages, the faster they can find a replacement job. So that applies in this recruiting process, because the lower the wages, they've applied to all different places and they will get a faster offer than what you might be able to give them if you're doing one step at a time. Instead, stack up those steps and do as many as you can all at once. All the screenings, all the checks, everything that you've got to do, try to pile those on top of each other and get through them quickly, because you have employment competitors out there that don't have to do those things. And they don't have as many hoops they have to jump through, so they can get people onboarded faster. Please also remember that for lower wage workers, they need the clock hours ASAP, okay? They need to be on the clock soon. So another thing about this process is, please do not tell me that you only allow new hires to come in the first and third Monday of every month. That is too long of a waiting period, particularly for hourly workers. Try to work with HR, with your leadership team, with your management. Try to work with them to make it multiple points of entry that new hires can come in to get their paperwork started, to start shadowing if they have to, whatever you can do to get them on the clock, because otherwise someone else will put them on the clock faster and they'll be out of your candidate pool before you know it. Okay, so expedite, expedite, expedite. Next, choose your communications wisely, because the way you communicate with them says a lot about your company, and also it's going to be more effective one way versus another. I've seen almost all of our clients switch from calling for scheduling interviews and trying to leave voicemails for people over to text messaging. So if you know anybody on your leadership team that still thinks text messaging is not a professional form of communication, we have got to get over that hurdle, because now people of all ages, not just younger workers, but people of all ages are texting, and it's much easier to get things scheduled if you can do that via text, instead of having to wait until you can both get on the phone at the same time to compare calendars, okay? So choose your channel wisely of how you are communicating with your candidates throughout this process. Now, if you are a good-sized company with, I would say, more than 50 employees, I hope you're using an applicant tracking system, an actual software system. There are great ATS systems out there. And then if you happen to be a smaller company than that and you don't need the actual software, please make a legit spreadsheet. Make something where you track all applicants that come in and you have a status column of who contacted them last and what is the status of their application. Are they still in the pool? Are they not in the pool? What's next? Do they need those, background checks and things? Keep some kind of system. And if you have, here's the roadblock. The reason this says no excuses is because the roadblock I hear most often is the managers who have been given an ATS system, an applicant tracking system from HR, they don't love the system. and it's clunky, or it takes a long time to put people into it, and I don't have time for that. I just need to call these people real quick. I don't want to track how many people I called and how many interviews I've scheduled. But I gotta tell you, HR can't really help you if you don't track what's going on. In fact, one of my my friends that has a large organization and oversees all the recruiting efforts, they have dozens and dozens of locations. And if a location calls into corporate saying, we need recruiting help, he now has a rule that says, if your ATS information is not up to date, you have not put in there how many applications have walked in the door, how many interviews you've done, what the status is of every applicant. If you have not kept that system up to date, corporate cannot help you, because we're trying to prioritize all these different locations, and we're here to help, but we can't do a squeaky wheel gets the grease situation. It has to be a proper prioritization of who needs the most recruiting help. So if one organization, one location needs 3 positions filled and is screaming, help us, but there's another location in another city that needs 22 positions filled at that larger organization, corporate needs to know that so they can focus the efforts on that 22 where that building is really, really struggling. Okay, so please get over the fact that it might be clunky, it might be time consuming, but I promise you, if you get in the habit of using your ATS and really maximizing the functions that it has to work with you, it will help you in the end. Because the systems also communicate throughout the application process. They communicate to the applicants the status of their application and the status of that job, which means it helps keep them in the know throughout the whole process instead of falling out of the pool because they never heard from you. At least if they applied through an ATS, they can see where they are, what the next steps are. They can email in questions, and you can email them the status really easily of, what the next steps are, for example. So please also do not ghost unselected candidates. What I mean by that is, for years, we thought it was okay to interview people and never call them back. Oh, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out that they never got the job. Somebody else must have gotten the job because we never called them back. We just had so many applicants, we didn't have time to call everyone and tell them they weren't selected. Or I'm an HR manager and I just didn't want to have to call and tell people they weren't selected because that's an uncomfortable conversation. So we just didn't. Okay, so for whatever reason, for a long time, we thought that was okay. And then now, of course, these last several years, we've been in an employees market where the candidates were ghosting us. I mean, we'd schedule people for interviews that didn't show up to the interview, or we would hire people, they'd accept the job, and then so many of my clients say they didn't show up on day one. They took another offer and went somewhere else. So we're mad when they ghost us, and we need to realize they feel the same way when we ghost them. So use your applicant tracking system or have some kind of message. It doesn't even have to be a phone call, some kind of email, text, or message that says, thank you for applying. We've moved forward with other candidates and we appreciate your time. Okay, so make sure you're letting them know. A huge reason for doing this. It's not just to be nice, because I know you're busy and we don't have time to do just extra things that are nice. Here's the deal. If people apply and they never hear anything, or worse, they interview and they never hear anything, here's what happens to your employer brand. They are hopeful. They're excited. They tell everybody that they applied, they interviewed. I'm so hopeful for this job. And then they hear nothing, and they hear nothing, and they hear nothing. And that hope turns negative. That hope makes them mad because they never even called me back. They never even messaged me to tell me that they already hired someone else. Then they're going to start telling their friends and family, well, don't even apply there because they won't even call you back. Don't apply there. They'll interview and then ghost you. You'll never even know what happened, right? So you don't want that to impact your employer brand. They may even go on Glassdoor and say that they interviewed there and that maybe they enjoyed the interview, but no one ever called them back, which then turns it to a negative interview situation and perception on their end. So stop ghosting the unselected candidates and at least just let them know that you've moved on and gone another direction, and thank them very much for their time and their interest. Okay, here's another one. I see so many people get into a job and say, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what they told me it was going to be, or not what I pictured. So when you're doing your recruiting, I highly recommend that you take a good look at your job previews. Are you giving realistic job previews? Now, this is much more common in the kind of lower wage positions, or those companies that we serve who have a lot of 30, 60, 90-day turnover. A lot of folks will come in for orientation, and then once they actually get out on the floor or onto their job, they say, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And then they're going to move on and want to take some other job, because where else did they apply when they applied for you? Everywhere else. And so they got other job offers, and they're going to take one of those if it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. So please make sure in the recruiting process and during your communication with them that you're giving them realistic job previews. Now, you don't have to try to scare them away, you know, you don't have to tell them all the most terrible days you've ever had, but you do need to be realistic that it's not going to be all roses and cherries all the time, and things will get tough in this job. They might get dirty. It might be hot. It might be cold. It might be, you know, difficult, whatever that is, and be very realistic. I see a lot more companies now doing job shadowing and letting folks come in and shadow for an hour or a half day to see the job they will be doing and make sure that that's what they want to do. Now, if it does scare somebody away, that's okay, because you'd rather they get scared off in the candidate pool than after you've already spent the time and money training them and onboarding them and giving them badges and uniforms or business cards or whatever you give them. And instead, we'd rather be realistic before that and have them opt out, okay? All right, now a lot of companies use some kind of hiring tools, some kind of assessments. But then when I talk to HR or I talk to the managers, they often tell me that what they're using, I don't really look at it, I don't really use it, or it's not very helpful. So please make sure that if you want to screen candidates more effectively, that you're using the right kind of hiring tools. And I need to be very clear in saying that any of these 4-quadrant type assessments, there's lots of them. We, of course, do DISC, but there's the Predictive Index and Myers-Briggs and all kinds of other assessments out there that have, for example, a 4-quadrant or almost more of a personalities test, certainly behavioral tests, things like that. You really need to make sure you're using those properly. Never, never, never use behavioral style interviews as a screening tool to weed out people. Okay, to say, well, he's not a high C, so they can't be our accountant, right? Because aren't all accountants high Cs, very compliant driven and, you know, very structured and formal and organized and all of that? Well, that's not necessarily true. You don't have to be a high C to be a successful accountant. So we never want to use it as a screening tool for weeding people out because of their behavioral style, okay? But it can be a great tool for you in an interview. For example, when I'm hiring folks, I always have them do the DISC assessment, and there is a cheaper DISC, by the way, just for hiring. It's not the full-length 40-page program that we do for management training. Instead, it's a much shorter, more succinct report. But in the shorter DISC, it actually gives you, of course, their style and some of the generalizations about their behavioral style, but it gives you interview questions. So if you have somebody, for example, who is a high C, who loves structure and formality and, you know, they are almost seen as a perfectionist by some if they're a very, very high C, it would give you the kind of question for an interview such as, I see that you're a high C on DISC, and you told me that you love this and this and this, right? You're very detail-oriented, love to be accurate. So tell me about a time when you didn't have time to be as perfect as you wanted the project to be, or the goal or the task to be, and you had to move on. What happened? And then they can tell you about whether they chose to be perfect and miss the deadline, or whether they chose to hit the deadline and just put their perfection aside, which could really matter in the position they're going to take at your organization. So no matter what kind of style they come out of that report with, it will give you specific questions that are behavioral interview questions that will allow you to tell them, have them tell you, about a difficult situation that they overcame because their natural style was this, but the business environment was requiring them to be adaptable and flexible. So great use of tools, but make sure you're never using these tools to just weed out people because they don't have a certain type of graph or a certain strength. That's not an appropriate use of these, okay? Awesome. So our new reality, folks, is shorter term workers. We used to have folks who stayed 20 plus years at organizations. And because of the market, even as it shifts, because people have more choices now, they have more access to jobs through all the online postings. We have faster recruiting happening everywhere. It is a new reality that workers are going to change jobs and change companies more often than they used to. So I want you to be realistic about how long people are expected to stay. Are there positions now that if you keep those folks for 6 months, that's great, because maybe it is more of an entry-level position to get their foot in the door, or maybe it is a position that that is harder to fill, okay? So some of my clients, now I'm not, I don't mean that I'm advocating for, 6 months, woohoo, that's great. But I have clients who can't even keep staff for 90 days in certain positions. So right now we're working with them to create a 6-month goal in that position. Then once we get people there, then of course we will stretch out to, 9 months, 12 months or beyond. Other positions, even if it is more of a high level position that used to be there 20 plus years, you're lucky to get a subject matter expert to stay even 5 or 7 years these days, which is a lot shorter than it used to be. So please grasp the reality that we have moving forward. And if you are in HR, in senior leadership, in management, make sure that everybody's on the same page about how much recruiting is going to be happening each year. Because this past year, I saw so many of my HR friends who used to do lots of different types of HR, more and more of their plate was recruiting, where recruiting might have been 25% of their job several years ago, and now recruiting is 60% of their job because of all the churn that's happening in their field. So we need to be realistic about that and talk with the senior leaders about how much time we need focused on recruiting and building that employer brand. And I would argue too, don't ever try to get a new recruiter approved that's just recruiting, okay? Try to get a recruiting and retention specialist so that that person can not only handle the recruiting and handle all the selection and the interviews and all of those abundance of tasks that we have now, but also make that person the point person for all the new hires and checking in with new hires and things. So in the next session, we're going to talk about the onboarding process and how to welcome new hires. So make sure that your recruiters are also involved in that. And if you can make a case for getting a new person added to your HR team, don't just make them a recruiter, make them a recruiting and retention specialist or strategist so they can work both sides of that relationship before and after employment with you, okay? All right, so it's going to take a new mindset around recruiting and retention and seeing our candidates as internal customers, things like that. We have to have this new mindset if we're going to get better results moving forward. It is absolutely critical to shift that mindset. Don't forget, as I mentioned on the last session, we all come out of these webinars and training sessions and conferences with all kinds of notes and great ideas. and then we go back to work and don't do anything about it. So I encourage you to set aside some time, an hour a week or a couple hours a month, where you have a Fix-It Friday or a Workforce Wednesday, and you block time on your schedule to really look back at these notes and implement one new thing every week or every month that is going to make you a more effective leader, a more effective recruiter, a better organization, a better place to work. And that way you can make progress over time instead of it looking so daunting that, oh, I got to do this and this and this and this and this. I don't know where to start. Just pick one initiative or one change you want to work on, block out time for that, and take one step at a time. Okay? All right, so as I mentioned, this is session 2, Attraction and Recruiting, of our 6-part Magnet series. So I hope you'll join us for the upcoming sessions for these other 4 topics. And now it's time for Q&A. So Maggie, have we had any questions come in that I need to answer?
We have. So the first question is, so Cara, as you were talking about your employer brand online, you mentioned sometimes there are negative comments about your company. And the question is, would you respond to those online negative comments?
Oh, that's such a great question, and I get that one a lot. Okay. We don't want to be in defensive mode, because that will put you in a negative light for anybody who's Googling and looking at those things that don't know you. If you try to respond with, no, that didn't happen, or you're lying, or, try to defend yourself, that's not good. What you can do is, if you think this person is legitimate in their concerns, that's really the first step, is, do you think they're legitimate in their concerns, even if you feel like it's wrong, but it was their perception of the situation. If you look across Yelp and other kind of comment and review sites where the general public reviews things, I think the most effective ones that I see are the ones that acknowledge their concern or their frustration and say, we are so sorry that anyone on our staff made you feel that way, or we are really bummed to hear that you had such a negative experience when you came in or when you worked here. So first you want to acknowledge and apologize that they had that experience. And then you go straight to your goals and your intentions. So you try to say, we are so sorry that that happened to you. That is not our intention, and that is not how we do business here. So we strive to provide quality. We strive to make everyone feel welcome. We strive to communicate with all of our applicants throughout the process. Whatever it is that they complained about, or if they complained about pay, again, you don't want to just defend yourself. Well, we do a compensation analysis every year, right? Instead, focus on what you do that maybe isn't all about pay. And you can say, we're so sorry that you feel our pay didn't match the market. We are constantly trying to bring value to our staff and provide professional development and advancement opportunities and mentorship and other things. You can list out all these non-pay related things that, even if your pay isn't at or above market, that is still valuable to people, and that to let them know you really care about the whole compensation package, the whole value that you bring to people, and that you're committed to improving that and evaluating that and enhancing that every single year. So just talk about your efforts and what you do, what you're continuing to do or what you want to do better. We're working on that. Thank you for the feedback. And I hope you will apply again someday, or I hope I wish you well on your journey with another organization. Just stay very, very positive. Don't ever go negative, and try to stay out of defensive. I got to, battle it out because that's not true. Yeah. Try to stay away from that. Great question.
The next one is, what is your recommendation for how we might make new hires feel welcome and improve the new hire experience?
Okay, excellent. I can certainly touch on that now, but as mentioned, our next webinar is going to be the G of Magnet, which is guidance upon entry, and that's all about onboarding. So Jessica Ray on our team is going to share with you some great strategies of enhancing that new hire experience and helping folks feel very welcome. Couple quick tips is to make a get to know you cheat sheet. So your managers, once someone's hired, then you can have them fill out a form about their family and their hobbies and their favorite drinks and snacks and where they would want gift cards from and those kinds of things. So yeah, make that get to know you sheet if you're HR or if you're a manager, and then share that among the managers working with that person. So that makes people feel really welcome. And also, I love welcome baskets. Let's just go back to the old traditional baskets of welcome to the club, welcome to the company. I have also seen some groups, if they have to work from home or if they have remote workers, like in different cities. I just recently saw a post of an organization that sent a box and balloons to the person's home as the welcome basket. Wow. So it doesn't have to be that you're on site in person for that. You could also just ship it to them with some maybe company branded goodies inside or some snacks and balloons or those types of things that really make somebody feel welcome and glad that they chose your job. So there's a couple tips, but in general, we'll be covering that a lot more on the next session.
Perfect. And the last question, unless anybody else has any more, is where should we be looking for candidates if our current pool has dried up?
Oh, great question. Okay, so again, depending on the market in your particular industry, we want to get creative when we need to find new talent. If we just don't have a ton of applicants coming in, then we've got to look somewhere else. So you can always look to different industries. If one industry is not as promising as your industry, you may be able to poach or take folks who are looking for a career transition from one area into another. And then other things are looking at the programs within your state or your city, because there are tons of veteran placement programs. There are a lot of folks coming out of the military that are looking for good jobs, and they have tons of transferable skills, even though they don't maybe know the language, the business language of how to put that on their resume. So you can work with these veteran placement groups, and they will help you decide what type of veterans coming out of certain positions of service could be a great fit at your organization. So veteran-based programs, also going to your urban league, your chambers, your other organizations and networking groups around your area. Something more unique that I've seen a lot of organizations do now, in almost every major city, there's at least one organization that is placing people into work positions who have developmental disabilities or physical disabilities. And so you may want to search for organizations like that if you have some jobs that are harder to fill, but they could be done by people in those categories. So definitely check out the resources that you have within your city, within your state, and you can often find a huge pool of workers that you didn't even really know existed, or they didn't have access to your opportunities. Now, there are some organizations as well, if you have more office jobs or things that can be done remotely, there are stay-at-home moms and dads that are looking to get back in the market or maybe work part-time from home on certain days of the week. So if you get creative and think about what are the actual requirements that I need for this job, and sometimes you don't even need people to have a degree. There was this influx of workers who had degrees when Generation X and then the millennials, of course, when all of those groups like rushed to four-year universities, most of the companies changed the job descriptions to say degree required or degree preferred. And now I'm starting to see that pendulum swing backward for example, a receptionist job at an organization that used to say degree preferred or degree required. Now they're saying, we really don't need a person in that role to have had a degree, and we could get somebody in the position who is more grateful to have that job and who is very qualified for it without a degree. And then you have less of that stepping stone effect where sometimes people just get their foot in the door at like a receptionist position, for example, they just get their foot in the door there so they can quickly move within the company, and then you're hiring another receptionist again. So you want to look at what responsibilities and requirements really match that particular job, who we need for it. Don't overhire, meaning don't hire people that are overqualified for a position. And then, of course, we don't want to hire people not qualified for positions. So take a really good look at that as well. And that can help you find other pools of people that may be available that you had kind of excluded in the past. We
had another question come in. Do you have specific guidelines around texting? You had mentioned texting, for example, with permission only, or as a continuing communication tool, or as just a first point of contact?
That's a great question. And that really comes down to the culture of your company. What does that look like? Now, you're going to have people with a more traditional mindset that say, no, 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 you're not using texting for company, company communication. And then you have other companies who rely on that almost as their exclusive way to communicate with staff. Think about restaurants. Think about nursing homes with the CNAs out on the floor. You can't email them. That's not going to get through. You can't call them while they're serving food or caregiving and things like that. Home health aides, there's all kinds of positions, manufacturing, out on the floor, those types of jobs. So I'm seeing more and more software companies and apps come up with texting tools and apps that send notifications out to the staff, and that's a great communication tool. I'm also seeing a lot more employee engagement software that is kind of a two-way street where the staff can tell the management, give them feedback, and then the managers can check on their people or ask their people questions. So you definitely want to use technology to your advantage in better communication, but choose the channel wisely. You don't want to send something very important and something that people need to keep record of as a text message. It's really hard to search in text messages. You can't store them. You have to delete them if you have too many on your phone. That is an email. But the text messages is great for a quick announcement or quick question or quick update about something. So I think text messaging is fine even once people become staff, but you have to decide as a leadership team, what is that going to look like? One other quick comment about that. I have some clients who have said, well, for example, a healthcare group that will say, well, Cara, we can't let our staff text message during their job because of our customers, because our patients or our residents think, oh, my nurse is on her phone all the time, texting people. So one company that I talked to, they actually put these big giant banners at the front of their doors, like right where the entrances were for visitors and everyone who came into the building. And it had a picture of a hand with a phone, and it said on the banner, if you see our staff on their phone, it's to provide better quality care, because they had just implemented a great software system that allowed them to text one another on staff from hallway to hallway across the building. And so they had to change the perception of the residents who were coming into the building, the family members of the residents coming into the buildings. And so they proactively did kind of a PR campaign to get people to realize, look, just because we're on our phone, it's not that we're not working. It's not that we aren't providing great care. It might be that we actually are communicating with our co-workers and colleagues across the building. So talk to your leadership team. It's not that everybody has to be on the same page, but you have to have kind of a range of acceptance. And then once you decide that, let your team know what is and isn't acceptable for that. So it definitely depends on the type of environment you're in and the type of service you provide, things like that. But it is worth talking about. Do not let the old school traditional thinkers just put their foot down and say, we're not doing that here. You can't do that. We have to open up the conversation, shift their mindset to say, what is acceptable today and what do we need to evolve to with this new workforce?
Well, that is it. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. And I put the link for the next week's session in the chat box as well. And you can also order Cara's book on Amazon. But if you want bulk discounts for all of your managers to start a book club, please reach out to one of us. I put Jess and also my email in the chat as well. So feel free to reach us. And also, of course, you can always visit us at wereduceturnover.com for all kinds of retention resources. And then, of course, our YouTube page and our email list as well. And also, Cara is very active on LinkedIn and posts wonderful content almost daily. So I would encourage everyone to connect with her on LinkedIn as well. But thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinars.